Okay, so I got the high sign. We'll kick off right on time here. My name is Steele Lorenz. I run FBN Regen, which is our a brand new offering that's looking at helping farmers adopt regenerative farming practices and make more money from the sustainability practices that they already have. Welcome to our panel entitled "Sustainability: The Practices That Get You Paid." I wanted to do this panel in part because I think that there's a lot of information about how regenerative and sustainability practices can be good for your soil health to help you either reduce your input cost or increase your yield. But increasingly there are marketing opportunities based on various practices, things like no-till, cover crops, use of nitrogen inhibitors. Buyers of grain are looking for transparency and are starting to differentiate between how, realizing that not all commodities are essentially commodities. And so I brought together this a panel of FBN members to talk about the practices that they are employing, what they're seeing from that, the data that they're using to track and be comfortable with the claims that they're making, and then also the marketing opportunities that they're seeing. And I hope that you'll see that there is a diverse set of opportunities and that they're growing pretty substantially. And so I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Mitchell.
Hey everyone, my name is Mitchell Hora. I'm a 7th generation farmer from southeast Iowa, over in Washington, Iowa, about a little over 4 hours east of here. Family farm is relatively small, about 800-acre family farm. Been doing a bunch of stuff with sustainable ag and soil health on our farm, so we're going to dig into that here. But I also have a soil data analytics company called Continuum Ag, do some consulting with farmers and just trying to integrate soil health data to figure out what the heck are we talking about here when we're talking about soil health, and how do we take some of these buzzwords and put some value behind them. And value for not only as us as farmers, that we can build upon that and build upon it to really make some environmental changes or really be able to create a positive impact, but also to be able to be more profitable in the short term and keep more money in our pockets so we can invest back in our family farms and in our rural communities to be not only environmentally sustainable, but economically resilient.
I'm Peterson from Lake Mills, Iowa, north central Iowa. With my mom and dad, I run about a 4,000-acre row crop operation where in 2011 I started doing strip till on my acres. And from there, I started doing it because I wanted to ban fertilizer. I thought that'd be a good idea for efficiency and maybe some fuel savings. And what I started to discover was kind of a whole new world of soil changing to infiltrating water better, less erosion. And then from there we tried cover crops, and we continually just row indexed every nutrient we put down, and there was more profit at every level, and everything the next step was always something more and better. And the thought I had as I looked at this was, as I kind of was envious of organic premiums or even non-GMO premiums, was how could we command that? And I started doing some math and just some research. It's out there, university research with regard to carbon sequestration and soil erosion, and built a new brand for our farm called Vital Grains. And it's very much around that, hey, yeah, we're raising corn and soybeans right now. We'd love another crop, but in doing it the way we're doing it, there is very substantial gains in environmental health, soil health, I should say, and a lack of things we don't want in our water getting in there. And it was amazing, and that's what led me to connect with Steele. And I think it's a pretty exciting journey so far.
Scot McPheeters from Gothenburg, Nebraska, which is halfway from here to Denver. And I have farmed with my wife for about 40 years, and then our 2 sons and son-in-law have all returned to the farm. So you have to have a lot of profit centers to do that. And of course, sustainability, we all think about that. And of course, not only economically, which is kind of first and foremost, because you have to be there to do the rest. But then, converted to strip till, and and of course, I guess I didn't say I'm 5th generation, and the 6th is back there, and the 7th is carpet farming, and so it looks like we may have to keep this up for a while. So I think it's important to be sustainable, as I said, economically, but also in order to do that, we're going to have to make the people who buy our products understand that we're in this for the long haul, and they can be comfortable with what we're doing. So, you keep a lot of records, and one of the things we've done that's probably been the most helpful is grid sampling, 2.5 acre grids, and year after year, and of course we've done a lot of manure, and at first it was just broadcast, and now it's more zone, and driven by those and all the other layers of maps that we take. So we all have that information. And something else that's come to mind though is we grow all food grade corn, and the consumers there want to know what we're doing. And so we fill out sustainability forms, and it's going to come, and Ron will talk a little bit more about this, but it's going to come to even the people who buy fuel or anything else want to know what's happening on your farm. So, I guess I take a little bit different tact, that it isn't actually the data, maybe the seed number or the whatever. It's a bigger picture that we're just going to have to keep getting better, and we got to tell our story because we are getting better.
Hi, I'm Ron Alverson. Did anybody else notice how they lined us up here by age? I feel a little discriminated against here, Steele. But maybe my age will be to your benefit. I got more experience, huh? Made more mistakes? Yeah. I'm from eastern South Dakota. I recently retired, but my son has continued the operation, and we've been in that area since 1879, so we were homesteaders. And actually my story goes further back, well, not further back than 1879, but back in 1970 when I was going to SGSU and taking soils classes, I had a prof back then that he said, some of you guys are probably going to go back to the farm, and I want you to make darn sure that you work on one thing, and that's build your soil back up. Restore that soil carbon that was in those soils since we plowed back in the late 1800s. And I took him seriously. I went back to the farm, and then in about 1983, we dramatically changed our operation. We'd been plowing and doing all the tillage, to control the weeds that we had to do back then, and we went to a system called ridge till, and we started growing a lot of continuous corn. And my prof was still alive at that time then, and he advised me, he said, you get out there and do baseline soil sampling on all your fields, extensive ones, and mark those down and keep those old soil tests and watch what happens to that soil after the years go by. So we've got 35 years of extensive soil test history for soil organic matter, soil carbon. And after those years, we grow a lot of corn on corn, I said, and reduce tillage. We've just about doubled our soil carbon. And that'd be 0 to 1 meter soil carbon. We took a lot of extensive tests because soil scientist says, well, you just can't measure that top 6 inches. You got to know what's going on below that. So, and then I became involved in the ethanol industry, and I'm sure a lot of you folks deliver corn to ethanol plants, and maybe you've even invested in an ethanol plant, and maybe even a board member on an ethanol plant. And you've probably heard that those ethanol plants that sell to a market called the low carbon fuel standard market in California and Oregon. And those markets reward those ethanol plants for reducing their emissions. And you reduce your emissions by reducing your energy use, your electrical use at ethanol plants. And if you can do that pretty effectively, they get a really nice premium for those fuels in that California market. But none of those markets have recognized that corn farmers, biofuel feedstock producers, can participate in that. So one of my goals has been for the last 5 years to try to work with California and Oregon and those guys to recognize that corn producers, any biofuel feedstock producer, can do things out on his farm that he can build soil carbon, and he can reduce nitrous oxide emissions, reduce energy use, and he should be incentivized for that, because after all, if we're going to tackle this climate change issue, we got to use all the tools in the toolbox. So in one of those recent efforts, we'd really like to, we're working on a program now to start a Midwest low carbon fuel standard. And it would be unique, and that would be the first low carbon fuel standard that would recognize upstream biofuel feedstock, low carbon production practices. So we've extensively being involved with that. We've modeled and calculated the carbon intensity of the corn we grow, and because we've been sequestering carbon so fast that we're zero carbon corn producers and has been for many, many years. So just an idea of what the opportunity that we have to do environmental services for society. I'll stop there.
Outstanding. So we touched a lot about practices and some of the marketing things as well, and I'd like to come back to that. But first, I would like to go through and say, regenerative practices are ill-defined. There are many things that, may or may not be included, but I'd love to hear one thing that you guys do on your farm that you think is really, really important that others here should spend time looking into. And we'll start with the youngest at heart, Ron. Go ahead.
Obviously, the first thing that we did is reduce our tillage. Mm-hmm. That just enables soil carbon to build. And you couple that with a really high residue crop, you're returning a lot of carbon, atmospheric carbon that corn crop sucked out of the atmosphere to the soil, and given the soil microbes an opportunity to build humus and to build soil organic matter and thus sequester soil carbon. Another really important part of the corn ethanol life cycle, greenhouse gas emissions, is nitrous oxides from nitrogen fertilizer. So better fertilizer management, use of enhanced efficiency fertilizers can greatly reduce your carbon score, as well as sharpening up your rates. If you can get down to 3/4 of a pound of N per bushel of corn, that's about as good as you can do, I think, according to the models that say that, but it's certainly attainable. Lots of guys are doing it. Side dress nitrogen, those things can all add up to reduce your carbon footprint, and hopefully we'll get paid for that someday.
Scott, one thing.
Sure. Probably strip till, zoning and targeting those nutrients and variable rate.
Perfect.
I'd say move away from fall nitrogen applications and split apply from, I would say, pre-plant and sometimes at plant. What we do is pre-plant, at plant, and then with Y-drop, everything right at the base of the corn plant. And it's been a lot easier to get to. Our goal is 0.7 pounds of nitrogen per bushel of corn raised. And the tools are there for us to be able to do it. And when you run the math on an anhydrous rate that you may apply in the fall compared to a more expensive UAN product, you don't have to put on as much because you are essentially putting it there only when the crop is going to need it. That's what we've discovered. Like I said, the tools are there. There's precedence for it, and we're having a lot of success with it. It's part of our operation. We certainly wouldn't give up.
I've got a cheat, Steele, because I've got two that tied.
All right. Well,
but I'll go fast. One of the things that I'm really excited about is relay cropping, where we've taken our cover crop, and instead of terminating it after we plant green, we're taking it all the way to seed and harvesting 2 crops on the same acre in the same year. This year it was wheat with soybeans growing into it. In 2020, we're going to be doing the same thing with cereal rye, potentially wheat as well. We've got a couple different areas set up to do that. So I'm really excited about that and keeping that pump in carbon all the time. Number 2 is 60-inch row corn with interseeded cover crops into that. So being able to open up a little bit more area so I can get some cover crops interseeded into there, be able to open up my diversity and sequester more carbon, but also fix nitrogen, open up P&K availability. I think we're really going to be able to keep cranking down our synthetic fertilizer rates because we're manufacturing it.
Yeah. And so I have a follow-up on your 2 that you already cheated on, but some of the stuff that you're saying is pretty different, right? How are you making sure that you are still coming out better from a profit perspective, and how close are you measuring that?
Yep, so the profitability is really what all this boils down to, is how do I be more profitable on every acre of farm ground too? Not just at the top line, but really dialing down to we utilize zones and look at zone profitability. So keeping really good records in terms of our management inputs and the yields that we're gaining off of that, of course, but monitoring closely our nutrition that we're putting on there too. We do weekly soil sampling to monitor these things, working with Dr. Rick Haney, who developed the Haney Soil Health Test, to do weekly soil sampling to watch and make sure that as we're experimenting here, we're being careful that we're not hurting our soils, we're gaining, and we want to document that to help other people.
Perfect. So next question for going around the horn is going to be about data. We are a data company. What should people be tracking, and what tools are you all using to both track your success, and then as we get the eventual question I'll get to is about marketing. What data do you need to make your grain more valuable to buyers? We can start with
first.
Yeah.
Okay, so I like data a lot. We do a lot of stuff with data, especially on the soil side. But really, I think what it boils down to for me on what we need to track is monitoring not only your yield, but profitability, carbon impact, water quality impact, water use efficiency, and nutrient density. So that's the categories that I've factored that into. Exactly what are the metrics that we're going to utilize to communicate our impact on those ecosystem services? I don't know exactly yet, but we know that we need to be moving in the right direction on those components.
It's everything. Every time we go across the field, the monitor's set up. We're telling it what products we're putting on, at what rate, what's the analysis of the product, because technology's here. The data science that FBN has and other people are going to have, and simply our desktop management tools, we're able to make a lot of sense out of what we do in every pass. It may not be something that jumps right off of a yield map or something, but by doing that and attaching a price to it, we'll be able to tell where we're at, profit and loss, and more importantly, we'll be able to tell the story to end users that we want to convince to pay more for our otherwise commodity product that we're only going to get commodity pricing for. If we've got data that says, hey, this many fewer pounds of this, that, and the other thing, and this fewer pounds ended up in the Gulf of Mexico, it just tells a compelling story. So the time is, I feel like really now for this, with devices that we have in our pockets. You could be dropped in the middle of Omaha and you could hail an Uber and be back here in no time. Before would have had to send a messenger ahead and say, hey, meet me here with your car. It's just those type of technologies where things are connected rapidly. Person A wants this, person B has this, and maybe there's people in between. It's not nearly the feat it used to be, and I think it's pretty exciting.
Well, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of a little bit different because I admire tremendously the data that you're collecting and your passion for it. And it's not that I have any less passion for it, but I seem to have less time for it. But that's a good thing because normally I get fired about once a week. And so I have to find something else to do. And so part of this was I know about advocating for the future and what, it's good to have that data. But if you don't have customers interested in the data, it's not of much value either. So actually, Ron and I have spent, 10 or 12 years in Washington, D.C. At an annual fly-in. And so obviously, we collect all that data on not as much as you guys do probably, as much as we can, and it's a question better asked of my sons who are driving that part of it. But the things that I see that are important to people, the data that we're trying to collect are with carbon, it's just everywhere. Every room you go to any of these seminars and it's all about carbon. And it's about the environment ultimately. And I'm just so excited. And we have these nice little sheets here that I gave to the Secretary of Agriculture this morning about, get with it, Nebraska, but everybody can. But, it's about fuel. And you think, well, that's passe, ethanol, whatever. But it actually is a driver for a lot of it. And as Ron has alluded to, and maybe he'll expound on that, but, there's going to be ethanol plants that will offer you more for your corn if you have low carbon corn. So.
You guys said it all. You hit all the points. I would add one. When you think of it in terms, I'm so hardwired with the carbon and low carbon fuel standard and looked at all the points that they model to determine your carbon footprint. And one big one is the fuels that you use, for example. If you use all fossil diesel and fossil gasoline, you have a pretty high footprint. But if you switch those all to, say, like, if you got E85 pickups, or if you use high blends of biodiesel or even renewable diesel, which is a super low footprint, and you can displace all your diesel with a renewable diesel product and use it year-round because it has good flow characteristics. But you can reduce your carbon score significantly by that, by using those low-carbon fuels to power your implement. So Scott talked about this vision that we have for an ethanol industry to be able to reward producers for upstream low carbon practices. I envision it as being a mechanism where each corn producer will have their own carbon footprint calculation based on the tillage you've done, the fuels you've used, how efficient you've used your fertilizers, all those metrics that come into your carbon score, and you'll have a personal score, and your corn will get rewarded on that carbon score. So that's what we hope to get to. Who knows, in 10 years, we might be all there. I've often said that the low carbon fuel standard in California as well as Oregon has turned all ethanol plants, at least all the Western Corn Belt ethanol plants, into carbon counters. That's an important component when they make all management decisions. What's this do to our carbon score? I think the day will come someday where corn producers or biofuel feedstock producers, any producer of ag products, that may be an important part of their management also.
Yeah, I think 10 years down the road or sometime in the future, that's highly likely. I would love to talk a little bit more about what we can do between now and then to prepare for that, and the marketing opportunities that are available. Either Mitchell, you have talked about research opportunities where there's funding and resources available. The FBN has brought a couple of grain buyers to bear where they're doing research and supporting reduction in carbon intensity. Ben, do you want to talk a little bit about the project that you and I have done together?
Yeah, sure. So in multiple discussions with Steele about this topic and all the hard work he's done making connections with big users of corn and soybeans in the market, well, that's of course our wheelhouse. He brought a team from Tyson to us, and what was the number they had? How much of the world's or the United States protein do they produce every? Is it like 25%?
I think so.
Yeah. Big company, and we sat in our farm office and talked about a few things, and I asked him. I said, "Well, why? I mean, why couldn't you guys just say that?" Because they were asking a lot of detailed questions about what we do, and very detailed. And I just said, why couldn't you guys just say that based on all our data, this is regenerative, this has these qualities, because we've got gluten-free water. Nobody seems to be checking this. And he made a great point. Jamie was his name. He said, we don't get a pass like that. We're too big. We're in too many people's crosshairs, and NGOs and the government. We need to make sure that we have absolutely every justification for saying what we're saying. So, which brings me to another point, and the same thought they had. Everybody's concerned about regulation and the political pendulum. Which way is it going to swing next? What better way if we could find an economic incentive to avoid regulation where we're making more money because of our practices rather than being beaten with a stick into certain practices that maybe don't make sense. Let's do a free market thing where everybody wins. Tyson can have a more nutrient-dense corn that are fed to their chickens and other livestock, and possibly even a better end product. But more than that, they can defend themselves as to what they've done with regard to the environment and just responsibly sourcing their ingredients.
Great. Scott, I know that you and I have talked about programs that you have with direct production contracts and with Frito-Lay's. Would you talk a little bit about how you came to have that and what they care about, what kind of records they need to or are interested in?
Well, initially, they moved from Hereford, Texas to Gothenburg, Nebraska with their collection plant, and all the chips made west of the Mississippi for Frito-Lay come from corn from Gothenburg. So it's really a relatively small amount of the total crop, about 12 million bushels is all it takes to do that. And so just because of location, I guess we won the zip code lottery that there we were. And so we've continued to cater, I guess, if you will, to what they want, and we fill out. It's become more and more prevalent with sustainability of the crop. PepsiCo is the world's largest snack food company, and obviously everybody's had a Frito-Lay. I've never met anybody who hasn't eaten a Frito-Lay chip, and so we appreciate that greatly, by the way. But they want to know all kinds of things and it's kind of one size fits all sometimes. We have a questionnaire we fill out, and I remember one of the questions was, do you allow the children of your workers to go to school? And of course, matter of fact, we require it, but it's kind of a one size fits all. That would be applicable in some countries, not necessarily in central Nebraska, but nonetheless, there's all kinds of questions. It's a lot about irrigation, since that's one of the reasons Frito-Lay came to Nebraska was irrigation. We've grown food grade crops for decades. And so they want to know how many BTUs of electricity, how many BTUs is it diesel? Is it, how many inches of rain and how many inches of water, and what's your irrigation type, or do you have a nozzle package? And it gets pretty specific, but for your pivot.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly invasive. How long does that take?
Well, it is, in one way it's invasive, and in another way, if you're doing what you're required to do and requested to do, it's almost like a report card, and you look at your report card and you go, well, wow, that's something you have. And so in a way it's invasive, in another way it's kind of reaffirming that, and it's good to see the progress, But I guess I got some report cards that showed progress, some that didn't, but when I was young. But usually these do, and one trick is, and we've all kind of chuckled about this as growers, is if you start out in a really good place and you can't improve very much, what's going to happen to you? Well, you didn't improve very much, right? So, but it seems like there's enough room for us all to improve. But that's a good word, invasive. You got to be willing to show that you're doing what you need to do.
Yeah. Mitchell, tell us a little bit about marketing opportunities that you're seeing.
Trying to open up some more. We don't have a lot of stuff really locked in yet, but I see some different opportunities there starting to come about with even some of these direct things like carbon markets are starting to come out. I don't know. I don't have a great answer either way on what's really going to work out there, but I like that things are starting to happen. The wheels are turning a little bit. Some of our other markets, we've got some barley planted this year. And I've got a malter that came to us because we raised some wheat this year in our relay crop. And they said, hey, what about some barley? Mm-hmm. So we've been able to open up there. So we've gone from, our operation has been corn and soybeans for decades to now corn, soybeans, wheat, barley, and rye. Mm-hmm. Pretty different for an Iowa farm. Yeah. So definitely seeing some opportunity open up to be able to market in that aspect. But I think in terms of how do we prepare for more markets that are coming about, I think it is really fine-tuning your data, having that cleaned up. A key thing I think is going to be to have data that's clean and concise that can be just plugged into an opportunity. And that's where you guys have an opportunity, is to make sure that the data is cleaned up and that we're able to communicate a consistent message to a supplier. So as these markets are coming about, it's a chicken and the egg kind of problem, that they're trying to develop a market of people who want to buy ecosystem credits or sustainably sourced grain or sustainably sourced ethanol. But as we're developing that market of buyers, we have to develop a market of supply. Mm-hmm. So as farmers, we understand that these things are coming. So if we can band together and be able to collect this information to be part of the conversation, to go to Tyson's when they're saying, hey, how do we do this? How do we do that? How do we do that? We can really have that conversation with them to say, here's how we're moving the needle. Here's how we've been able to quantify this in a manner that is economical, and we can scale this.
Could I add one more thing? I forgot to mention it. It's a great opportunity to tell our story too, because we forget, being in this room, everybody knows what a modern planter is capable of. Everybody knows if you strip till what that looks like, what it's capable of. It reminded me of that when Caroline and Jamie was their name. We're at our farm. I mean, because I was explaining to them how our machines worked, what they did, the speed at which they could do them, and their jaws, I don't think, were ever closed. It's fascinating to these people that don't know how we do what we do, and it's a great storytelling opportunity. So that I think so many consumers these days, it's not about head knowledge, it's more about heart knowledge that drives some of their purchasing decisions. And a lot of that comes from, a vast majority comes from how good of a story can you tell. So this really gives us that opportunity, I think.
It's not only quantifiable data, but qualitative data.
Yeah. The data backs up the story.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. We're unfortunately running short on time. I could talk to you guys all day. But if anybody has questions for our panelists. Hang on one second. You got a mic coming too.
Oh. Could you elaborate on trying 60-inch row corn and detail, challenges, population, kind of things like that? Interested?
There's no challenges. Just kidding. No, I can elaborate a bunch more on that too, or find me. I've got a story on it on my website as well if you want a bunch of info. I planted 2 rows, turned off the third. So I skipped every third row. So it wasn't a straight 60-inch system. I call it kind of a 45 inches essentially of corn, 45 inches essentially of gap. I upped those to 50,000. And then interseeded about V6 or so. I can elaborate more later. Find me. Happy to discuss 60-inch corn all day.
Hi, Jason Bishop from Washington State. This question is for Steele, actually. I was kind of curious about what FBN's role might be, in participating in sustainability and regenerative practices.
Great, and thanks for the question, Jason. It's almost like I planted you there. So our real interest is in creating more commercial and marketing opportunities. We believe that analytics, of course, can help, and we're increasingly building out support to make recommendations for you as you're considering different agronomic practices. But my real role at FBN is to help tell your stories to buyers of grain and to help differentiate what FBN members are doing versus what everybody else is doing. And so some of these conversations that can be quite difficult to have one-off with whoever is buying your grain, we believe that we can be stronger together as one voice. And so things that are going to take more pushing, like some of the ethanol opportunities that we talked about, FBN and I will be pushing on that. Some of the, how should I say delicately, wrangling of food companies. Everybody has different expectations, different stories that they want to tell, different data that they want. If we can simplify that and organize that, makes it much easier for our farmers to participate. And also, as you've heard, some of these marketing opportunities are hard to find. If we can be a source of information for you and leads on where you can begin to market your grain for premiums, that's also the role that we want to play. So it's certainly early days for us, but the interest that we've had inbound is pretty staggering. And so I hope to be able to provide more commercial opportunities to everybody in this room and beyond in the coming months. Two questions?
Hi, this is for Mitchell. What percentage of organic matter are you trying to attain in your soil?
Right now, our farm is pretty variable. Okay, so I'm in an area of Southeast Iowa where all these rivers are coming together. We've got, in Iowa, everything's based on CSR. So we range from 5 CSR to 100 CSR on our farm. So wide variability. So right now, most of my samples are coming back at 2.5% organic matter up to about 6.5%. Would really like to be continuing to push up above 4% on everything. I think for me, I don't know that there is an end goal. I think it's continual improvement. And to me, that's what, not just sustainable ag, but regenerative ag is really continuing to move forward in terms of those ecosystem markets that I discussed. But I'm really focused on the carbon piece as well, and not only the stable carbon, but the available carbon to feed my microbial activity. But would like to see, if we could keep pushing above that 4 and 5%, that'd be pretty awesome.
Time for one more question.
Yeah, thanks for a good panel, guys. Mitchell, you mentioned that one of the pieces of data you wanted to collect was on nutrient density. I'm just curious, do you have a way you're going to do that? And then for the other guys on the panel as well, is that something that you have looked at, or do you think you will look at? Is there value in trying to collect that nutrient density from regeneratively grown acres?
Keith, I told you at the beginning you weren't supposed to ask any hard questions back there. But we have done a little bit of grain quality testing directly for things like protein, oil content. There are some tests that you can do. We did some at Midwest Labs. I think that can be an easy way to do it for right now. It's not that overly expensive. One of the tools that I think is going to be interesting to take this to the consumer is a handheld nutrient density reader being developed by the Bionutrient Food Association, where they're utilizing a handheld reader to evaluate the actual nutritional density of a food in real time. It sends a signal to your phone. So stuff like that, I think the consumer is going to have some tools as well to see actual nutritional density of food. And we're going to have to continue to improve as well. And for me, there's not a great direct answer to really give you what you need right now. But we understand that healthy food comes from a healthy plant that comes from healthy soil. And then up the supply chain from there, a healthy crop can feed a healthy animal or produce better quality outputs to feed people, help to make them healthier, and overall create a healthier environment as well. So I think that piece is really interesting to keep monitoring, to tell that story. And what I think is really cool about the regenerative ag system is that we're going to be able to go beyond, and I think everything here, it's going to go beyond packages and labels and into just transparency. And here's the data, here's everything. And it's not a label that can kind of be tweaked and kind of be, is there really some value behind that? To here's true quantifiable value that not only plays to a consumer's emotion, but also to the science.
We got time for one more? We got one more right here. We'll take it.
Randy Riediger from Sioux City, Iowa, northwest corner. On your relay cropping, Mitch, kind of explain to me a little bit what your process was on that. I know you used wheat and you said you're going to rye.
Yep.
And then kind of give us an idea on some yields that you had and some challenges and what you'd change if you got time.
I keep getting picked on. So
You're the only one doing relay cropping.
yes, yeah. So basically what we did was we drilled wheat in the fall at a bushel per acre, and then in the spring came in and drilled soybeans directly into that wheat. No herbicide, no fungicide, no insecticide, no nothing. Drilled in the soybeans on April 24th, and then came back on July 5th and harvested the wheat over the top. Just clipped it off there and kept it for cover crop seed. I don't really have a market for these small grains besides that barley that I was able to find a buyer directly for. They found me. But just keeping it for cover crop seed. And it's all back in the ground and it's growing and looks pretty good. It ended up averaging 30 bushel, which is definitely not great wheat yields by my understanding. And we've never raised wheat before, but definitely not great yields. But with zero input into it in our first year, we didn't know what we were doing. Now we've got some rye this year. We're going to give it a little bit of nitrogen, probably a little bit of sulfur as well, and some fungicide for sure. So expanding upon that, the beans ended up averaging 44 bushel. After we took off the wheat, we did hit it with a little shot of Liberty around the outside, and that's all they got. So my inputs into it are extremely low. We're building our organic matters and stuff there like crazy, and water infiltration and worm counts as well. We're infiltrating better than 2 inches of water in less than 20 minutes on that farm now. And the worm counts that we did were 17 worms per cubic foot. So getting, some of those things that we can really quantify and see coming back, but ended up being 44 bushel beans, of course, is not that great, but 44 bushel beans and the 30 bushel wheat with not much into it, it actually ended up being some of our most profitable ground for this year. And we're going to expand upon it.
Outstanding. Well, I want to thank this panel for putting up with me and then for also sharing your incredible experience, guys. It was a real pleasure. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.